There is a specific kind of silence that follows a public execution. Not the loud, messy kind, but the quiet, refined version that happens in a garden filled with people wearing silk and drinking $1,000 champagne. I was standing near the edge of the sprawling Charleston estate, the humid salt air clinging to my skin, when Kimberly approached me. She didn't look like a villain. She looked like a queen mother in a champagne-colored gown, holding a glass of rosé like a scepter. Behind her stood 3 of the lead investors for the $1,080 million merger my stepbrother, Justin, was supposedly architecting. Justin was there too, checking his $50,000 watch and laughing at a joke one of the bankers had made. He didn't look at me. He never looked at me unless he needed something moved or fixed. "Alexandra, dear," Kimberly said, her voice cutting through the ambient noise of the string quartet. She reached into her clutch and pulled out a rusted, heavy iron wrench. She held it out to me with 2 fingers, as if she were handling something diseased. The catering truck's compressor is humming again. It's making the champagne warm, and we simply can't have that for the toast. I looked at the wrench, then at her. I didn't blink. "I'm sure you don't mind," she continued, her smile never reaching her eyes. "After all, we all know you're the only one here who's actually good with her hands. Justin was just telling the partners how you're the family's little grease monkey. It's charming, really, such a useful hobby for a girl." Justin let out a sharp, dismissive bark of a laugh. "It's true. Give her a motor and she's happy. She's just the mechanic, gentlemen. Don't mind the grease on her sleeves." The investors offered polite, pitying smiles. I didn't feel the heat of a blush. I didn't feel the sting of tears. I felt something much colder. I felt the familiar weight of the audit I had been running in my head for the last 3 hours. I reached out and took the wrench. The cold iron felt solid against my palm, a physical manifestation of the gap between their world of illusions and my world of facts. "I'll take care of it," I said. My voice was cool as marble. I turned and walked away. I didn't head for the catering truck. I headed for the vendor table in the back where my laptop was waiting. The silence I left behind was heavy, but the one I was about to create would be deafening. Have you ever been treated like the hired help by your own family? Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. I'd love to know who's part of our community today. I walked toward the far edge of the lawn, away from the clinking crystal and the performative laughter. I found my way to a small, wobbling folding table tucked behind a decorative hedge, the vendor table. It was where the people who actually made the magic happen sat to catch a breath. I sat down, pulled my laptop from my bag, and opened it. The glow of the screen was the only honest thing in this garden. As the boot-up sequence initiated, I looked down at my hands. They were clean now, but the calluses were still there. Kimberly and Justin loved the Grease Monkey label because it allowed them to categorize me as sub-professional. They saw my trade school years as a failure of ambition. What they never bothered to realize was that while Justin was busy failing his first year of business school and Robert was drowning in the 2018 mortgage crisis, I was the one keeping the lights on. I was the silent investor in this family's survival. I'd spent 3 years of my life working double shifts as a field technician to pay off Robert's back taxes, so they wouldn't lose this very estate. I'd paid for Justin's private tutors when he almost washed out of his MBA program. I had poured tens of thousands of dollars into a subscription to a family that never even sent a thank you note. My empathy had been a high-interest loan they'd defaulted on for years. I didn't reach for a tissue. I reached for my security token. Most people don't realize that being the invisible child is actually a tactical advantage. When people decide you aren't worth noticing, they stop performing in front of you. They leave ledgers open on desks. They talk about offshore accounts while you're fixing their internet. They treat you like furniture, forgetting that furniture has ears. This is the psychological edge of the overlooked. I spent my childhood learning to decode the silence between my father's lies and Kimberly's greed. I became a forensic accountant not in spite of my family, but because of them. I learned to find what was hidden because everything in my house was a secret. I saw the file I was looking for. Project Golden Oak. The $1,080 million acquisition. My brother thought he was the architect of this deal. He thought he'd outsmarted the government and the auditors by burying the shell company links in a maze of subfolders. But I knew his logic better than he did. I knew where he'd hide the bodies because I was the one who used to clean up his messes. I didn't feel a pulse of anger as I flagged the first discrepancy. Sentiment is just bad data in a forensic review. I deleted the impulse. This was a balance sheet of pain, and for the first time in 32 years, I was the one holding the red pen. I hit the Initiate Forensic Hold button. Inside, my laptop glowed with a different kind of sunrise, the kind made of facts, numbers, and quiet retribution. The merger wasn't just paused. It was under my knife. I had been working for 20 minutes when the shadow of a silk gown fell across my screen. I didn't look up. The scent of expensive jasmine and condescension told me exactly who it was. "Still playing with your toys, Alexandra?" Kimberly's voice was like velvet wrapped around a blade. I checked the catering truck. The compressor is still humming. "You've ignored a direct request from the hostess of this event." I kept my eyes on the lines of code. "The compressor isn't the problem, Kimberly. The foundation is." I'd worry less about the champagne and more about the structural integrity of this evening. She let out a sharp, dry laugh. Justin appeared beside her, leaning against the hedge with his hands in his pockets. "You always did have a flair for the dramatic, Alex," Justin said, his tone dripping with mock pity. "I told the board you were a success story that we support our less fortunate relatives. It looks good for the metrics. But if you're going to sit here and brood, you're making me look like a liar." "I don't have to make you look like a liar, Justin," I said, finally closing the laptop and looking him in the eye. "You've done a remarkable job of that, all on your own." Kimberly stepped forward, her face hardening. "Careful, Alexandra. Your father is only keeping you in the will, out of a sense of obligation to your mother's memory. One word from me about your unstable behavior tonight, and that obligation vanishes. You'll be exactly what you look like right now, a stranger at a party she wasn't meant to attend." She leaned in, her breath smelling of vintage wine. "You think you're so smart because you can read a spreadsheet. But in this world, power isn't about numbers. It's about who believes your version of the truth. And nobody believes the girl with grease under her fingernails." Justin smirked, checking his watch. "The investors are waiting for the final toast, Mom. Let's leave the help to her work." They turned and walked back toward the lights, their laughter drifting over their shoulders like ash. They weren't just excluding me. They were trying to rewrite my reality. They thought they were gaslighting a mechanic. They didn't realize they were taunting the person who had already pulled the pin on their billion-dollar grenade. 3 days later, the salt air of Charleston was replaced by the pressurized, sterile oxygen of a 44th floor boardroom in Charlotte. The mechanic was gone. I stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling glass windows, looking out over the city skyline. I wasn't wearing a denim jacket or carrying a wrench. I was wearing a charcoal gray tailored power suit, my hair pulled back in a sharp, unforgiving knot. On the mahogany table behind me lay a single object, the rusted iron wrench Kimberly had handed me at the wedding. It served as a paperweight for a stack of federal injunctions. The double doors swung open. Justin marched in first, followed by Kimberly and Robert. They stopped dead in their tracks when they saw me sitting at the head of the table. "Alex? What the hell is this?" Justin slammed his briefcase onto the table. "I just got a call saying the merger has been flagged. Why are you sitting in my consultant's chair?" I didn't rise. I didn't even look up from my tablet. "It's not your consultant's chair, Justin. It's the lead auditor's chair, and you're 45 seconds late for your first compliance hearing." Kimberly let out a shrill, hysterical laugh. "Is this a joke? Robert, tell your daughter to stop this masquerade." I didn't get past security. "Kimberly, I issued the security badges," I said, my voice cutting through her noise like a scalpel. I gestured to the 2 men in dark suits standing near the door. "These are senior agents from the government's forensic division. I've been assigned as the primary lead on this acquisition." The color drained from Robert's face. He finally spoke, his voice trembling. "Alex, you're a mechanic. I own the firm, Dad. It was a front for private forensic auditing. I spent 10 years becoming the person people hire when they want to find the money you've hidden. This is the fragility of false power. People like Kimberly and Justin mistake proximity to wealth for the actual skill to manage it. They think that because they wear the clothes and sit in the offices, they possess the competence. But power without substance is just an illusion. When a real authority enters the room, the illusion doesn't just fade, it shatters. Justin, let's start with the $2 million consulting fee moved to a Cayman account last Tuesday. I leaned back, watching as the realization hit them. They weren't looking at a grease monkey anymore. They were looking at the person who held the power to delete their entire future with a single keystroke. The atmosphere in the boardroom didn't just turn cold, it became vacuum-sealed. Justin was still blustering, trying to use his height to intimidate me. "This is a reach, Alex," Justin sneered. "A $2 million transfer is a rounding error. It was a retainer. It's perfectly legal." "I agree," I said, my voice as flat as a heart monitor's flat line. "Retainers are legal. Forgery, however, is not." I tapped a command on my tablet. Two documents appeared side by side on the projector. On the left was the signature page for the loan that started Justin's company. On the right was a digitized copy of my mother's last will. "Robert, look at the screen," I said. "The seed money for Justin's company didn't come from a silent investor, Dad. It came from Mom's life insurance policy, the policy that was supposed to be held in trust for my education. Kimberly, you told me the policy had lapsed. You told me Mom left us with nothing but debt." I zoomed in on the signatures. The analysts have already flagged this. The signature on the loan document, the one supposedly signed by my mother 3 months before she died, is a perfect digital trace of her signature from years prior. Someone forged a dying woman's name to steal her daughter's inheritance. Kimberly's face didn't just go pale. It turned a sickly, translucent gray. "That is an outrageous accusation," she stammered. "It's not an accusation, Kimberly. It's a forensic fact. You didn't just belittle me for 10 years. You robbed me to fund a lifestyle you didn't earn. You took the only thing my mother had left to give me and used it to buy Justin's first office lease." Robert looked at Kimberly, then back at the screen. He looked truly small. "This $1,080,000,000 merger is built on the foundation of a felony," I said. "This isn't just a family squabble anymore. It's bank fraud." I looked at Justin. He looked like a ghost in a $1,000 suit. "This wasn't revenge," I whispered, loud enough for only them to hear. "It was just accounting. And after 7 years of interest, the bill is finally due." The silence that followed was absolute. Kimberly lunged across the table, her manicured nails digging into the mahogany. "Alexandra, please," she sobbed. "We're a family. We can fix this. If this merger dies, we lose the estate. You can't want your own brother to go to prison over a technicality." "It's not a technicality, Kimberly. It's the law," I said. I didn't move an inch. "And as for family, you forfeited that word the second you forged my mother's name. You handed me a wrench to fix your catering truck while you were living off my stolen inheritance." Justin suddenly stood up, his face contorted. "You think you're so high and mighty? You're a spiteful, bitter woman, Alex. You always have been." I looked at him, and for the first time, I smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. "I'm not destroying the deal, Justin. You destroyed it the moment you built it on fraud. I'm just the one documenting the wreckage. And don't mistake my clarity for spite. Spite is emotional. I am being purely professional." I turned back to the agents. "Secure the server logs. I want a full freeze on all assets, effective immediately. This merger is dead." "Alex, wait!" Robert called out, his voice cracking. "What happens to us?" I stood up and smoothed my jacket. I picked up the rusted wrench from the table and held it out to Kimberly. She stared at it, trembling. "You told me at the wedding that I was the only one good for fixing things," I said. "But some things are too broken to fix. Not even the grease monkey can save you this time." I dropped the wrench. It hit the polished mahogany with a heavy, final thud. "I'm not the mechanic anymore, Kimberly. I'm the one who disassembles the engine of your lies." I walked out of the boardroom without looking back. My heels clicked against the marble floor in a perfect, steady rhythm. The fallout was total. Within 48 hours, the merger was terminated. Robert issued a statement about restructuring, which was code for selling the estate to cover the legal fees. I wasn't there to see it. I was in my new apartment in the city, a space filled with sunlight and the kind of quiet you can only hear when you stop waiting for an attack. No more floral bedspreads from a childhood I was forced to outgrow. I sat at my kitchen island, drinking coffee. I opened my personal laptop and saw an email from Robert. He didn't ask how I was. He asked if I could talk to the auditors to help Justin avoid jail. He called it a family favor. I didn't feel a surge of anger. I didn't feel the need to reply with a list of grievances. I simply clicked the checkbox next to his name, hit delete, and then emptied the trash folder. That was the final audit. The balance sheet of my life was finally, perfectly, in the black. I want to speak directly to you, the one listening who knows exactly what it feels like to be Alexandra. Maybe you're the one who was left out of the family group chat, or the one whose success is treated like an accident by the people who should be your biggest fans. We often seek apologies from the people who hurt us, but an apology only carries weight when the person offering it realizes they have lost the power to hurt us anymore. You don't need their sorry to be whole. You need your own competence. If they won't give you a seat at their table, it's because you were meant to own the building. Don't waste your breath trying to convince them of your value. Spend your energy building a life so undeniably excellent that their opinion becomes a footnote in a story they no longer have the right to read. The most powerful form of closure isn't a loud argument. It's the silence of a morning where you no longer care what they think. Sometimes the greatest gift people can give you is their rejection. It forces you to stop trying to fit into their small boxes and start building a fortress of your own. Sometimes the best revenge isn't a loud explosion. It's the quiet, undeniable truth of who you've become. If this story resonated with you, share your journey in the comments. Subscribe for more stories of quiet power and professional sovereignty. Remember, you aren't just the mechanic of your life, you are the architect.